Uh, but the JCC said we want to get some details as to this contracting you did with regards to the Beetham water recycling plant. The Prime Minister raised this a long time ago. The thing about that is it was an indictment. And I'm just going to put it out there because, the then opposition leader said there is something wrong with this. He did ask for investigation. Nobody paid attention to him. When your organization, the JCC, stepped in, let's talk about that. The kind of money that was spent there, ridiculous money spent.
Well, the first thing I want to just say before we get into commenting on the Beetham water recycling project is that what I'm saying here is I'm not speaking on behalf of JCC. I'm a former
Understood.
president of JCC, immediate past president. But in fact, I want to say that to talk with two aspects of the thing, Rennie. Firstly, the whole question of the contract, how the contract was tendered and how the contract was awarded. There were serious concerns on that were echoed in a JCC press release of 20th of March 2014. And in particular, there was the fact that the successful contractor, it was a consortium, their tender was 72 million US dollars higher than the next tender.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a fact that we had it, because we had access to the documents. I had the real documents and so on. So that's one concern. The whole question of how proper was the award of the contract and how transparent was that, to what extent were the rules followed and so on. The second issue, which in fact in my opinion is the bigger issue that was mentioned in the JCC press release, I wrote on it considerably in my own newspaper column, and I will be writing more about it shortly, is the whole question of the business case. When we need to understand what the Beetham water recycling project involved. Water that is wastewater that is being pumped away from the citizens of Greater Port of Spain was to be treated and refined in a particular way, not to drinking water standards. That water would be treated and refined in a water recycling project which is located at Beetham. That water would then be piped to Point Lisas, and that water would be used by the Point Lisas industrial plants for cooling of their industrial processes. And there were real questions. First of all, that whole arrangement, would it strengthen WASA's financial position or diminish WASA's financial position? NGC was paying the contract, so we had a peculiarity there. Going back to the award of the contract, we had a gas company awarding a water contract, and a water company buying water from a gas company. That's how ridiculous and Tweedledum and Tweedledee, like Alice in Wonderland, we became in Trinidad and Tobago. I labeled it procurement arbitrage, because what happened under the current set of rules under the Central Tenders Board Act, a state enterprise does not have to go through the Central Tenders Board. There's an exception in Section 20A of the Central Tenders Board Act. A state enterprise doesn't have to go through the Central Tenders Board. WASA, if WASA were to try to tender that project, WASA would have had to go to the Central Tenders Board. Therefore, the decision was taken, obviously, at a very high level. And let's not forget that the then Minister of Finance, Minister Larry Hawaii, as he then was, had been the chairman of NGC just before. So when the project was being developed and all of these designs and proposals were being refined, Minister Hawaii was there. So there's a circle of knowledge and responsibility in terms of how our monies were committed to this project, and the business case has not been made. It was omitted from the 2013 budget. The whole Beetham water project was omitted. A $1 billion plus project was omitted. So it's what we call an off-balance sheet project. Okay, which is the beginning of financial blind spots and so on. It's an off-balance sheet project. It was omitted from the budget, and up to now, the business case has not really been tabled. I know I saw in the press recently where the former president of NGC, that is Mr. Indar Maharaj, who was also, he had a split responsibility, which could have been construed as a possible conflict of interest, because he was also chairman of WASA at the same time as being CEO of NGC. Mr. Indar Maharaj has now been dismissed, I understand from the press, by the new board of NGC. But in fact, I would have liked to have seen, and I said so in one of my columns, I would have liked to have seen from Mr. Indar Maharaj some kind of an accounting in terms of what was the business case for that project. And we need to have an urgent understanding of these questions. It's not just a question of this contractor costs more than that contractor. There's a long-term arrangement of 20 or 30 years under which the whole thing operates. And if we don't understand the business case, it's to our collective detriment. So I want to appeal, if they're listening, to the current Minister of Finance, the current Chairman of NGC, Mr. Jerry Brooks, Mr. Colin Mimbert, and the people with responsibility for these important areas, the heads in WASA and so on. We the public need to get a proper accounting for the business case behind the Bt.4 water recycling project. I'm glad you raised it, Rennie. It's a very important series of concerns.
It is something we will keep going at. But just before I go around to the other members of the panel, I just want to deal. You must be encouraged by the recent injunction that freezes, I think, is $180 million in assets of that company. So it's very clear that the state is going after getting back all the money that was expended to that company. Are you encouraged by that?
Well, yeah, it's an important set of legal armory that is very seldom used in this jurisdiction. It's available to us as a Commonwealth country, the Mareva injunction and the Anton Pilar injunction, and so those things are used to grab hold of assets of a company when the company is up to no good, and regulators and law enforcement authorities want to get hold of the assets before the company can dispose of them or liquidate them and so on. And those legal options are used. So I was pleased to see them being deployed. They didn't use the phrases in the press releases, but that's what happened. I would like a follow-up, as Rhoda was saying, because there was a date given that I think SIS had a date to go to court and put forward a rebuttal, and I would have liked to have seen some sort of further reporting as to what SIS put in court and so on, so that we could have a fuller understanding of the picture. But it's a very important step, I think, in the correct direction.
Beautiful. Let me go across to Sunity Maharaj and then go across to Dr. James, because this is, Sunity, this is right in your area as a former editor. When you look at $464 million spent by the National Gas Company on public relations, communication, advertising, and for a 5-year period, including $4.3 million spent on a program called What is Happiness? While this was happening, are you satisfied that, is it a question of disclosure, the fact that the information was hid from the media, or the media didn't even bother to ask, why are you spending this money? I mean, you are the National Gas Company, you're not Coca-Cola, you're not trying to get people to purchase anything. I mean, what is $4.3 million on a what is happiness? I don't understand that.
Well, it seemed to be a catchment for PR spending and enrichment. The issue that comes up under all of this is, where is the point of intervention before these things are committed? And the point that Afra made of the various ways in which accountability has shifted from Parliament, which represents the people, to parallel structures that are not held accountable by law, the Central Tenders Board and so on. That didn't start today. The PP finessed the hand. They took it to the max, right? So you can go where the NGC is one thing, but I've thought that one of the more outrageous pieces of information that has come out in the past few weeks is the information that the Green Fund and the Unemployment Levy Fund have been mortgaged. In other words, we witnessed, and this is under the scrutiny of a former banker, Minister of Finance, Hawaii, a government that just was looking for whatever can move on
wherever I can get it, yes.
Where can I get this? Where can I get that? And that is what the NGC was. The NGC is a cash cow. It is not only is it a cash cow, I'm interested in finding out as well, it has a fund of its own for innovation or some kind of technological thing that people always said that they could not access it. People would apply on different projects, and this was it was there. Now, what is the state of that fund? Was money coming from that?
You just described a laundry room.
Right. So this is.
What station are we on? Be careful. Be careful, Rennie, please.
I said
Rennie, please.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Touche. And
They went to church for them. God, it's Sunday, but still.
Touche.
Sorry.
That's fine. So to prevent us having to go through these experiences over and over and over, it cannot be left up to whether one government is more straight than the other, or the press can get hold of the information. We have to have built-in safeguards into once you deal with public funds, and this is where the procurement legislation it has defined public property, right?
Yes.
And that is where
public funds,
and what is public funds, and all of this is public funds. But the fact that you create these parallel not just state enterprises, but things like the estate management company and all these entities to avoid, and it was not Kamala Prasad Bisesa who invented that. So let's talk about the whole history of government that has the power to create laws, all governments, to keep their hold on decision making, on use, on expenditure of public funds. The power belongs to the people, and we have been over time stripped. And that is why we have to have so much noise in the place and protest, because the framework is not designed for us, and is becoming less and less so. And people, and I think that's why people keep asking about the media, because the media becomes just the one avenue.
Yes.
Right? And when it is not up to the task, the media was not designed to be government, but it has fallen into that role, and it simply doesn't have the institutional capability.
But I don't even think that we're asking for the media to be government. I think that what we're asking, certainly what I, as a citizen, as somebody looking on, reading newspapers, looking at news, certainly what I'm asking for is for a particular level of responsibility in terms of how information is put out and how information is analyzed and put there. Because how do we know, for instance, that public procurement, the recent public procurement law is good law or bad law, right? You know that you could listen to Parliament channel, and Parliament channel not going to break that down for you because you're listening to people debate something. So then I now have to rely on columnists, or I have to rely on investigative journalists. And what I'm saying is, I would just like to see a certain level of responsibility.
Well, I take all the problems and the weaknesses, and we've talked before about the high turnover and the lower quality. I take all of that, but at the same time, the media cannot be the only source. And if we were to take procurement legislation, for example, it is the responsibility of Parliament. I think Parliament, in terms of the Parliament administration, needs to take note of the fact that laws are being passed in this country almost on a weekly basis. And under Ram Logan, I mean, you had such an avalanche of legislation. And it's not enough to expect people to tune in. There should be a separate capacity to break down law and bite size and tell people, for example, the Children's Act. So many people don't know what is the age, what is the difference between minor and whatever. And people are going to get big jail, 20 years. Right? And so on and so forth. So there is and it's not only them. What about the political parties? Political parties are only speaking in Parliament. Real political activity involves institutions where the members of the party are discussing and debating and in their little cottage meetings and so on and so forth, spreading information. The JCC itself must have a strong communication information component. So they are all over the business community, right? The lawyers, where are the lawyers talking? The lawyers are behaving classic cartel, just like the doctors. One is touched and everybody goes into silence because, who will not get the work and this and that, and you don't talk on your brethren. So we are being failed by the professional classes when we are being short, and the political parties have not yet developed into meaningful representatives of the people in an institutional way. It's only the leader and the people in the Parliament that matter.
Sunity Maharaj is one of the reasons that I paid very close attention to when the Prime Minister said, we are all dishonest, we are all involved in this. It's everybody to look at everybody. But we're talking about institutions right here. A moment ago, Afra made a mention to the former Minister of Finance, Mr. Hawaii. This situation with First Citizens, for instance, Dr. James, is something that I find distressing. I find it distressing because, again, we are looking, and I'm glad I have such a high-level panel here, because the idea is not just to look at what happened during the years, to see what we learned from it, where we came from it. In the area of $60 million, somebody walking in and being able to move $60 million is one thing, and something to make us all go like, holy Christ, what happened here? But when I hear about $35 million that we've received, but I haven't heard anything about the rest. Have you guys heard anything about it, Doctor? You heard anything about the rest of the money?
I have not, but I am.
And the reason I asked it is because most of them.